Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining Climate Action Nevada for our August legislative update. We're going to be talking about President Biden's infrastructure plan, the Build Back Better agenda. And with us today is Art Terrazas from LCV's Policy and Lobbying Team. Thanks for hopping on to talk to us and share your expertise about updates to this sweeping infrastructure bill. If you have any questions out there in the crowd, please submit them in the chat, and we'll try to get to them during our live Q&A period. So with all that being said, Art, thank you for joining us. Let's talk a little bit about the Build Back Better agenda.
Well, Tyler, thanks for having me here, and thanks to all of you again for letting me be here, and for all the fantastic work that you've been doing that has got us to this very, very crucial point in not only our fight, but also really, without exaggeration, in our nation's history. So going to talk about the Build Back Better agenda. Sometimes you've heard this kind of referred to as the reconciliation package that's being put forth here in Congress. Really, there's three parts to this whole package. The first part is clean energy, something that, of course, we've been fighting for a long time. This includes a lot of priorities, a lot of policies, a lot of pieces to get us to 100% clean energy that'll power the grid, that's going to provide for clean transportation and energy efficient buildings, and also give us clean power for our buildings. The second part of that is justice, the Justice for 40 initiative that the president enacted earlier this year, and also things that we're pushing. But also other elements of making sure that frontline communities who have really been harmed in the last few decades from fossil fuels and from plants and industrialization, that those communities are taken care of. There are provisions in the bill that are going to ensure that at least 40% of the benefits in this bill are going to the communities that need it the most and have suffered the most. And the last part, and of course, not in all least, is jobs. We are on the verge of seeing a transition to a new economy, the likes of which we haven't seen since the Industrial Revolution. But what that means is that we need to make sure that the jobs that are going to be coming in are coming online quick, that we're making sure that people who may need to transition from one job in one industry to another are able to do so very easily. And that those jobs are also high quality, good paying union jobs, and making sure that those jobs are made available, and that we're also getting people ready to step into those roles as we start seeing the demand spike up here. So we've got a two-track plan, which you have been seeing play out over the last couple of months in Washington. The first part of that plan was agreed to that there would be a bipartisan package, which you saw pass the Senate earlier this month. And once that bipartisan package was put together and agreed to, we would also be working on this Build Back Better plan, which is also known as a budget reconciliation package. These were things that were coming through, and the bipartisan package was passed by Dems, and then we also started working hard to pass the budget reconciliation bill. And that budget reconciliation package, the Build Back Better package, that includes all the priorities that we need for climate change, social justice reforms, and they were not included in the bipartisan bill. So let's talk about first that bipartisan bill and talk about what was in it. Really what we were looking for, it has passed the Senate in a 69-30 vote. That was done, as I said earlier this month. It was referred to as the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. It was a $1 trillion package, and in that included $550 million of new spending over the next 5 years. That also was financed by a combination of repurposing COVID funds and also strengthening taxes for things like cryptocurrency. And here's a bit of a breakdown of a little bit more specificity of what was in the package. Really, the way to look at this package is it was concentrating on what is thought of as more traditional infrastructure. So stuff for roads and bridges, public transportation, which is been needing some support, especially as ridership has declined in those areas over the last few years, airports and ports, but also included some provisions for other things that were non-traditional, like broadband internet, and also included some funding for some of the things that we were looking for, like clean drinking water, updating power infrastructure for us in the West, something that's very important, resilience and water storage. So those are some of the things that we're looking at in that package. We also had some money in there for other clean drinking water, low emissions for buses and ferries, and about $21 billion to address water and soil pollution. But this is just the beginning. It's just the starting point. While there were some of those provisions that were included in the bipartisan package, they were not nearly enough of the investment that we needed to combat the climate crisis. As we know, this is pretty much our last chance to do that. And it didn't go far enough in actually addressing the social inequalities that we're looking for. And we need to know that we need to demand more and know that this is was the floor of what our requests were, not the ceiling. So the budget reconciliation package. This is the beginning, we're at the beginning of a multi-stage process that can get kind of confusing. There was a budget resolution that was passed in the Senate with a 50 to 49 vote, strictly party line vote. All Democrats voted in favor of this budget resolution. This created the provisions for us to start writing the bill, which will allow us to spend the money on our priorities in the Build Back Better plan. So this included the provisions for climate, to combat climate change, to create good jobs and fight for social justice and equity. The package, it authorizes the Congress to spend or appropriate basically about $3.5 trillion for not only our priorities on climate, but other things like paid leave, childcare, healthcare, and education. The way this is going to be financed is going to be for tax increases on corporations and wealthy individuals. We're also going to combine this with taxes for those individuals that are making more than $400,000 a year. That's very important to note that if your income is not at $400,000 a year, if it's under $400,000 a year, I should say, your taxes are not going to go up after this package. We're looking to only tax people that are making more money than that. So what's in the package? A lot of stuff, a lot of priorities, not just for the climate community, but a lot of priorities for the labor community, for education, for healthcare. It's, as I said, $3.5 trillion. Some of the things we're looking at are, a clean energy package that's going to reduce emissions by 50% and 80% renewable energy by 2030. We're also looking for federal paid and medical leave with 12 weeks and paid parental and family leave by the 10th year of our programs. Community college for folks, more Pell Grants. We're also looking to pay adding dental to Medicare, hearing and vision to Medicare. We're also looking to lower the eligibility age. As I said, there's some different labor provisions in that. Also, climate corporation, the climate conservation corps is something that we're trying to create through here. So we're looking at just not only, like I said, priorities that we are looking for to combat the climate crisis, but these are also a lot of priorities that other groups are having and have been fighting for a long time that we really want to see get done now that we have the ability to move a bill in the Congress and we have a president that will actually sign onto it. So what happens next? As I said, this is the beginning of a multi-step process. Right now, the first step that needed to be taken, which was having that budget resolution authored and passed by the Senate, has taken place. The House is going to be coming back this week to start their work on marking up pieces of legislation. The House Natural Resources Committee is going to start their markup in 2 days on Thursday. that will also start to kick off a series of other markups. All those markups are looking to be concluded by around September 15th or the 16th. Those committees are going to be marking up different segments of the legislation that will then be rolled together into the reconciliation plan slash the Build Back Better plan that will go to the floor. Once the House and Senate return in mid-September, they're going to start to continue to hammer those pieces out. We're hoping, and I think it's the Speaker's hope, that a lot of those different facets will get done by mid-September because there was an agreement made by the Speaker with some members of the House that on September 27th, the House would go ahead and begin consideration of the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And then what we're looking towards then, I think, is that that process will be completed at the end of the month. And then once that occurs, there'll be a final vote on the budget reconciliation package, and that will get sent over to the Senate. And once that happens, then the House will also take up and have an actual vote on the bipartisan infrastructure bill. So committees to watch. As I said, natural resources they're going to start on Thursday. They're going to be looking at things like Arctic refuge protections, coastal resilience, equitable access to green space. They are also, I was just reading, looking to spend some more money on some other provisions because they're looking to raise an additional $6 billion through some fees for services on the fossil fuel industry to meet some other protections and also institute some other provisions. Ways and Means will begin what is anticipated to be a 3 to 4 day markup next Thursday on the 9th. Ways and Means will be looking at a clean energy tax package that offers tax incentives for EV purchases, investment tax credits, production tax credits, and manufacturing tax credits, all for clean energy provisions. The Energy and Commerce Committee will meet the week after. They will be, the big thing that's going to be coming out of them is the Clean Energy Payment Plan, which is what the clean energy standard transitioned to. But they will also, of course, be making investments in water, energy efficiency, school buses, industrial decarbonization, and others. Transportation infrastructure will meet, I think, the day after Energy and Commerce begins. They want to make some more commitments and look at to do some more things for clean water, climate smart transportation, and of course, the other committee which we'll be looking at is going to be agriculture because of a lot of the conservation items that are going to fall in there because they are going to be the ones that manage the forest management, which of course again is very important to us out here. Representative Horsford is pictured here, huge, great champion for us. He sits on the Ways and Means Committee, so his work is going to be starting very soon. He has been a very great advocate, not just on all of our issues, but also on transmission and looking at that issue and really being a champion to talk about how we need to make the investments in transmission so that when we get renewable energy systems online, that the grid will be updated and be able to accept and transfer that energy to people where we need it. So we just want to make sure that we recognize him for being the top champ for our community. So here's the job that we have ahead. There's three things that we want, of course, out of the Build Better Act, which we've been talking about. Clean energy, of course, it's imperative that we put the country on the path to 100% clean energy, powering, the grid, our cars, and our buildings, and that we cut the emissions by at least 50% by 2030. We need to make sure that all the provisions, not only the tax regime that we're fighting for and those incentives, but also things like the Clean Energy Payment Program are put into place so that we can get to where we need to be to meet that goal. Because again, as I'm sure you all know, this is pretty much our last chance to do this. And, whether or not we're able to have Democrats retain control of the Congress next year and have, another 2 years of legislative control in the White House, the science and the clock is just not on our side. We need to get to work quickly now because of the effects that we're seeing now, some of which are going to be irreversible, as we now know. We need to really start working on that. The justice provisions, we need to make sure that we have just and equitable solutions for all of these frontline communities that are being harmed and have been harmed, and make sure that they are not left behind in receiving these benefits. And of course, again, that we make sure that 40% of those benefits go to the communities that need it the most. And again, jobs, we need to make sure that the jobs that are coming on are just not jobs that somebody can get, that they're make sure that there are high quality, high paying jobs that respect the work that's going to be put into them and respect and protect the workers.
Thank you so much, Art, for breaking all that down, really giving us an explanation of what we can expect in the committees ahead, how this two-track plan is going to play out. We've been following this as our main priority at the Climate Action Nevada, and I think we've been focusing on this since March. We watched it transition from Build Back Better to American Families, American Jobs Plan, budget reconciliation, bipartisan bill. Now we're back to the Build Back Better agenda. And it's really great, even following this, it moves so quickly that it's nice to have somebody like yourself offer your expertise and sit down and walk us through exactly what these timelines mean and exactly what the process will be. So we appreciate your time. And that takes us right into our next section, which is a little question and answer. We have a few questions here that we had submitted earlier, and I wanted to run a few of them by you. First question I had for you is, what do you see as being some of the biggest hurdles to accomplishing the Build Back Better agenda?
I think, two of the biggest hurdles right now are two senators, Senator Manchin, of course, and Senator Sinema. Senator Manchin, is somebody who everybody has a lot of concern with because of some of the comments that he's made in the past regarding fossil fuels. Obviously comes from West Virginia, which is a very coal heavy state. And so he, it's natural that he wants to make sure that his constituents and his state's protected. I think that he will be pragmatic in the end as far as these things go, but we are going to have to craft things like the clean energy payment program with him instead of in spite of him, because we have no votes to lose in the Senate. We have, up to 5 that we can lose in the House, but we cannot lose a single vote in the Senate. And so that's why he controls a lot of the power, not to mention the fact that he chairs the Energy and Natural Resources Committee in the Senate. And so he will be working on this legislation as it moves through. Senator Sinema, for those of you that are closer to our friends in Arizona, know that she has been a very difficult legislator to work with in this last year, especially. She was one of the legislators that was helping to craft this bipartisan plan, but kind of dragged on this whole procedure, in my opinion, for us to get to the point where we're at now. And once, of course, the bipartisan plan was passed, she made the comment that she was concerned with the size and scope of the $3.5 trillion that we're looking for. So it's trying to get them, her to understand that these are not investments that are made because they're frivolous. These are investments that we need to make. We don't have a choice. Not to do this, the cost of inaction is not going to be just greater in dollars in the next 10 years if we don't do this, but it's really going to be greater in with people's lives, because especially in her state, Phoenix has one of the worst air qualities, I think, in not only the country, but the planet. It's just going to get hotter in her state. And we're really going to need to make sure that people are taken care of, because again, the cost of health and lives is going to be much more dramatic than she would anticipate. So those are really the two. I think in the House, mostly what it is just having people is just reassuring some of our Democrats. I don't think that is the case necessarily with folks in Nevada, but I do think that there's other Democrats in different parts of the country that just need some handholding, to put it bluntly, that the time is now, that we cannot squander this opportunity, that this is what we need to do, and that this is something that constituents all across the country support. When you look at poll numbers, and it doesn't matter where in the country you do it or which congressional district or who you talk to, but the provisions that we're talking about that are in this plan poll at over 60% most of the time. People want this, people understand this. And then when you talk about how you're going to pay for it, which is by taxing corporations and the 1% of the population, then those poll numbers and that support actually goes up. So I think that those are the kind of the three things: the two senators, and then just giving our aid and comfort and just support to our champions and our members in the House to make sure that they know this has to get done, and they're doing the right thing.
Sounds like one of the solutions to the hurdles is, continuing to educate voters on exactly what is in this bill, exactly what it can do for communities, and having them put the pressure on. And like you said, as more people learn more about this bill, you see support go even higher than it already is. So I think that's a message to us to keep pushing.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right.
I have another question here. Are there provisions or specific plans in the Build Back Better agenda that face more scrutiny and challenges than others?
I think some of the ones, for us, one of the good things is that you had this group of 10 representatives who were trying to push the speaker to have a vote on the bipartisan plan first and to get that out. And the speaker, we're very grateful that she resisted that, that she stuck to the original agreement. Those 10 individuals on our provisions and our climate goals, they're actually very much aligned, and they believe in what we want to do, and they're supportive of what we want to do. There is some concern with other provisions that have not been talked a lot about, as far as expansion for family leave, some of the free college, community college things. But really, when you start talking about what's in this entire package, a lot of people, especially given the last year and a half that we've gone through, these are again items that are very popular with people. People want to see more benefits for people that have Medicaid, dental insurance, as they were saying. You pick out one of these provisions and people are very supportive of that, because they know that the time has come that we need to make drastic changes, because for too long, too many have been left behind and left out of this economic prosperity that we keep hearing so much about. And so when you start talking about these provisions, it's very hard to argue against any of them. This is a benefit that we have that was not happening before. And even the climate provisions are something that people now are starting to be more supportive of. It's unfortunate that it took the situation we're in now, which is, having severe weather occurrences happening in almost every single part of the country over and over again, for people to really see that climate is an issue that they need to deal with. And I think it was at the beginning of August, there was a poll that came out. I don't know if it was which group did it, but the first time I think in history that climate was listed as the second most important priority for voters that were polled. The climate had never gotten that high. The first was healthcare, and number two was climate. And so I think really people have started to shift on, see that we need to do something now, because this is this is starting to become far too dangerous to not act.
Right. And like you said, it's some of that social infrastructure, the healthcare, the education that's not traditionally thought of as infrastructure, but like you said, on their own, they're extremely popular programs, and they're extremely popular ideas. So attaching those ideas and, reminding the public of the popularity of these things like expanding Medicare is hopefully will help us, with one of the biggest challenges. But you did mention that a hurdle that traditionally existed was climate change and tackling it, but it's become more of an issue that's on the front lines, and our representatives are more willing to address it. You're seeing more action, being taken around it, which leads me into question 3. Does the bipartisan bill go far enough in addressing climate change and the transition to renewable energy, knowing we have this momentum?
Yeah, the bipartisan bill doesn't do enough, which is why you're going to see such a big push in the reconciliation package. One thing right off the bat is like there's not enough money to replace, all the lead pipes that we need to replace to make sure that everybody has safe drinking water. We're going to have to go back and supplement that funding with the reconciliation package. There's, not a lot of money that's being put in there for electric school buses. That was something that got left out. So if we were going to transition to at the rate we need, that money needs to be plussed up and will be plussed up in the reconciliation plan. But also there's things that there's no money that's left out there for, which is, all of the incentives and the job transition programs to make sure that, that folks that are going to need to have a job, that we create those avenues to make sure that they have good paying quality jobs. None of that was in the reconciliation plan, or excuse me, the bipartisan plan. That's going to be in the reconciliation plan. So it's, we are at a real interesting and a very pivotal moment in our country. As I said before, we've got this huge transition that we haven't seen since the Industrial Revolution, with more people, more car manufacturers going to electric fleets, solar, wind power becoming much more cheaper. So you have utilities switching to that. What that means is that we're going to have to create jobs for those people that may need to find new work that are in those industries and transfer it over. And so we've got to make sure that that's going up, that that's there. And that's being taken care of, and there's no funding for that in the bipartisan plan.
Thank you. And lastly, we spoke about all the great things that we can accomplish with this infrastructure plan. What do you think it is that we can do either as a community or individuals to help pass the Build Back Better agenda?
I think it's just making sure that we're doing things like calling into the office, but also talking to friends and neighbors that are interested in getting them to call into congressional offices, to doing things from communicating message of thanks to people like Horsford, to also just reassurances and telling members like Titus that these are things that we want, and continuing that public pressure, that education with other people to talk about things. So whether it's through a tweet or whether it's through sending a letter to the editor, talking about why this provision is important and why we need to get it done and get it done quickly before the end of this year, certainly before the Halloween holiday. But we want to get this done, but constantly just doing the work that you all have been doing, which is the outreach, the education, and the communication. That is what has allowed us to get to the point where we are, and what's going to help us get over the finish line.
Thank you. And, hopefully we can keep putting pressure on that timeline, because it is so important, like you said, to get this done within this year, within October. And we're going to keep putting pressure and, sounding the alarm, because like you said, we're running out of time and this is the kind of action that we need. But Art, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us, all this knowledge. We really appreciate you coming down every month and speaking with us. And if anyone has any additional questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll see if we can't get to you and respond to that on a later date. But thank you again, Art, for joining us.
Well, thank you. And again, thank you so much, everyone, for all of your hard work. This is why we're able to do this, because of everything you all have done.
Thank you again, Art. So we talked a lot today about the different aspects of Build Back Better agenda, the two-track plan, how we're going to get this, passed, and the timetable necessary that we'll be following. And you might be asking yourself, what can you do? What is our job now? What do we do now that we have gotten this far? And after learning the potential benefits, we're going to ask you to get involved, to take action. Recently, our senators and representatives voted to pass a budget resolution that included ambitious investments to tackle climate change. That's why we want to thank them for supporting a job that supports climate investments and good paying jobs. It's important for our members of Congress to hear from their constituents so they continue to support bold climate policy. Show them support by thanking them and telling them you support the Build Back Better agenda. Make a call yourself or join us at one of our weekly phone banks. Speak directly to Climate Action members by clicking our Mobilize link in the comments below. Get involved, spread the word, let our representatives know that we want to see bold climate action in this infrastructure bill. Another way you can get involved is writing a letter to the editor. You can support the Build Back Better agenda by writing a letter to the editor, which is a brief letter about why you as a Nevadan want to see investment in climate action, jobs, racial justice and equality. We want to see all these things included in our bill, but we want to hear stories from you about how this could impact your life. Keep this on the forefront of the discussion. So sign up, click our Mobilize link, and you can sign a letter with us and get yourself published in the newspaper. Lastly, join us at our Pokemon Go cleanup event, September 4th at 9 a.m. September is National Public Lands Day, our month, and in celebration, we're bringing our community together with our Pokemon Go themed park cleanup. Join One APIA Nevada, the League of Conservation Voters, the Nevada Conservation League, Commissioner Justin Jones, as we clean up Spring Valley Park. During the cleanup, we're gonna have Pokemon scavenger hunt. Pokemon will be hidden in spots with the most trash. So come on out, leave your community better than you found it, and try to catch them all. Join us for Pokemon Go Park Cleanup by clicking the link below. And lastly, take action that we talked about. Stay up to date on our current events, find out more about what we have done in the past, and maybe find out ways that you can encourage us and our members to take action somewhere in your community. Follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and our link tree is a really convenient link to take all the actions necessary at one spot. So once again, we want to thank everybody for joining the Climate Action team for our monthly legislative update. We really want to continue fighting every day to support Joe Biden's Build Back Better agenda. And thank you again for jumping on, and we will hope to see you at our next event. Have a good day.